Today's talk was recorded specifically for our congregations to view on this Justice Sunday. It's titled Belonging to One Another, UUSC and Global Solidarity, presented by UUSC President Reverend Mary Katherine Morn and UUSC Director of Justice Education Reverend Deanna Vandiver, who spoke recently at our fellow Pacific Western Region congregation, the Neighborhood UU Church in Pasadena.
At UUSC, we strive to engage in the work of human rights and justice through radical partnerships of trust. We believe and understand that connection, kinship, is a fundamental human need, and it is our only hope for advancing a vision of justice and human rights. We are not alone. We are part of one human family. We share one living planet. We belong to one another, each and all.
Our work is not to build bridges, but rather be present with each other across the lonely abyss until our faithfulness reveals the connections that already exist. Connections that have been denied and disguised by the many forms of oppression alive in our world. Call again and again, friend. Wave your ribbons of solidarity. Remind me you are there, here, until I trust that I can find my way home to you. Find my way home to us.
Thank you, Dee, for those powerful words of connection from your poem. The image of finding our way home to us. And also the reminder that too often powerful systems work to deny and disguise love and connection. As political theorist Brian Stout has written in a blog he writes called Building Belonging, he says, all domination systems, whether we call them white supremacy, patriarchy, colonialism, extractive capitalism, all domination systems depend on three things to maintain their power: disconnecting us from ourselves and our bodies, disconnecting us from each other and our communities, and disconnecting us from the land and the other beings that inhabit the land with us. Domination systems use these tools to deny and disguise our true connections and create a sense, in that sense of disconnection, create in us our own belief that we are powerless. And friends, when we are disconnected, we are powerless. When we forget our connections, abandon the possibility of another world, when we fall into cynicism and despair, we are playing into the hands of people who would hoard power. Our perception of powerlessness is exactly what empire is depending upon to maintain its violent extractive hold on us and on our planet.
Thank you. The Reverend Mel Hoover reminds us in the collection, Been in the Storm So Long, we can dare to face ourselves in our entirety, to understand our pain to feel the tears, to listen to our frustration and confusion, and to discover new capacities and capabilities that will empower and transform us. And UUSC's mission affirms the dignity, worth, and power of all people. You heard the third, and power of all people. And it is this clarity about the worth and dignity and power of all people that makes it irresistible to act as if another world is possible. This analysis of power, practicing power with each other, resisting power over each other, grounds our work firmly in the liberatory practice of solidarity. Solidarity is a word that's used often, and I'll take a moment to give us a little grounding in it. Solidarity, where we acknowledge our own power and agency and connected struggles. It invites us to practice liberation, liberatory love, grounded in our breath, in our connection with each other, practicing as a lineage, as a collective, planting the future with our current actions. In solidarity, we learn to wonder, how is my well-being bound up with yours? In solidarity, we ask, what can we do to make our mutual well-being possible?
UUSC partners invite, understand, and practice solidarity. They embrace connection and kinship. And they consistently and stubbornly claim their power and reject the notion that there is little we can do. One of my favorite examples of this comes from our partner Pacific Climate Warriors, Indigenous people in whose homes and livelihoods and identities are at tremendous risk due to climate change. Some of them are in immediate danger from rising water, but make no mistake, as they repeatedly affirm, we are not drowning, we are fighting. They are not drowning, they are fighting. Some among them, a cadre of young adults associated with the Pacific Climate Warriors, found themselves together in a law school at the University of the South Pacific. 27 young adults from multiple nations across the South Pacific studying in a law school together were given the assignment to imagine the most progressive and ambitious climate change action they could take within a legal arena. And so they researched previous actions, international actions and campaigns, and decided that the United Nations General Assembly should direct the International Court of Justice to create an advisory opinion. I'll back up. The Pacific law students wanted to ask the United Nations General Assembly to instruct the Court of Justice to issue an advisory opinion on the human rights impacts of climate change. A statement, an understanding, accountability framework that does not exist. They took their proposal to the Pacific Island Forum and essentially got a nod and a congratulations. I don't know, maybe an A. But this was not an idle exercise for them. They wanted nothing less, these 27 young adults from the small nations of the South Pacific, wanted nothing less than a United Nations vote calling the court to issue this opinion. So they formed Pacific Island Students Fighting Climate Change, and UUSC is grateful and proud to have been one of the Pacific Island students' first funders. Solomon and Vishal Pacific Island student campaign directors told UUSC's board in October of 2022 in Boston that it was funding from UUSC that made it possible for them to attend the International Climate Conference, the Conference of Partners, COP, in 21 in Scotland. And at that meeting, they were able to make connections with large international groups like Amnesty International and Greenpeace, which really, they said, was what made their campaign possible, made it possible for them to carry their campaign forward. UUSC has also had the privilege of providing various kinds of support, including it's not infrequent that I'm asked to sign a letter to provide credentials for the students to attend gatherings of the United Nations. We also were able, through one of our supporters, to provide them housing in New York City during the height of their work on the campaign. And it just is such a great example of the way being a small organization and being able to move quickly and do things in an agile way is one of our superpowers, we think. With the sponsorship of the nation of Vanuatu, the students indeed took their proposal to the world, and ultimately, from October, actually, in 2022 to the next spring, gathered the support of 120 nations, almost 2/3 of the member nations of the United Nations. And on March 29th, last March, the United Nations General Assembly adopted by consensus the resolution imagined in that distant law school classroom by 27 activists who knew that they have dignity and worth and power. Solomon and Vishal and UUSC's Director of Advocacy were together that day in the General Assembly Hall as the vote was taken. And that afternoon, we got a message from Salote describing their tears of joy. I think even they weren't sure that this would ever happen. Their tears of joy and gratitude and the vision they have, the hope that that action brought them for their children and for ours. In the spring, our College of Social Justice will be leading the intergenerational spring seminar at the United Nations, and we'll be exploring with UUSC partners how we can support the ongoing work necessary to carry forward the Pacific Island students' vision.
Thank you. That will be at the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, and other partners may be there as well. I first read the report, One Story, a report of the First Peoples convening on climate forced displacement, when I was a member of the design team for Beloved Conversations Within. Perhaps some of you all have participated in that racial justice program offered by FAS Collaborative. And that's how I learned that in 2018, 20 years ago, UUSC co-sponsored and co-convened the gathering of Indigenous representatives from the U.S. states of Alaska, Louisiana, and Washington, as well as Bangladesh and Pacific Island nations. Imagine this convening, if you will, from around the world, facing climate change, right at the very front line of it. They met for 3 days and shared how climate change was very rapidly impacting their communities, their traditional ways of life, and they began to develop a collective vision for the future. And out of this came a declaration which includes, "We express our solidarity and the truth we are confronting as First Peoples and Indigenous peoples living in the areas most vulnerable to the impacts of climate crisis, including being forcefully displaced from our land. We maintain the unbreakable human and sacred spiritual connection with our land, air, water, forest, sea ice, plants, animals, and our communities handed down to us from our ancestors. And y'all, that convening committed to remain connected as First Peoples and Indigenous peoples that are affected by the climate crisis, with the goal of accelerating our progress to realizing our adaptation strategies. They are not drowning, they are fighting. And USC has accompanied them on this fight, and all that organizing, all that dreaming, all this trying to, where are the levers of power, right? Is it the UN? Is it the International Court? It turns out in this case, it is the Inter-American Council on Human Rights. Get ready, for economic, social, cultural, and environmental rights. And that special rapporteur, after so much collaborating, said, we will come and we will visit with the indigenous peoples in Louisiana and Alaska. And apparently it usually takes 2 years at least for something like that to happen once they decide they're going to come. But with USC's nimbleness available to accompany and convene, it just took a couple of months. It was an intense couple of months, not gonna lie. But they got there, and finally, the special rapporteur made the conclusion there is an urgent need to act to protect the lives and cultures of the frontline communities facing climate change in Louisiana and Alaska, finally offering a long-awaited global recognition and an international pressure point. As Elder Rosina of Grand Bayou, Louisiana said so powerfully, as small communities, we were isolated. In solidarity, we have a bigger voice and a stronger presence. They are not drowning, they are fighting.
These are just two stories that our amazing partners around the world, of the work that our amazing partners are doing with ours and your solidarity and support. Among our other work, just mention one, you may be aware that we have partners struggling for justice and accountability in Burma, also known as Myanmar. Our work with partners there actually helped to facilitate the United States' acknowledgement of the genocide against the Rohingya people. In solidarity, we strive to bear witness to the brutal violation of human rights around the globe. Which means that sometimes, even when we do not have partners in the midst of a crisis, we are called to solidarity. This happened just this past fall, as we joined human rights organizations in condemning the Hamas violence of October 7th and the horrific response of the Israeli government. We provided an early grant from our emergency response fund to support a trusted organizational ally who was doing humanitarian work in that moment in Gaza. And we continue to work with the funder community to direct resources to Palestinians and support our global partners in their demands for a ceasefire, for honoring the rights, human rights of every person, for resisting the lies of supremacy and disconnection and powerlessness.
Lucas Johnson, community organizing as spiritual practice, reminds us we have a responsibility to hold to the power of love that we know to be true. And here's the hard part, and to not allow the world around us to deaden that in ourselves. Resisting the lies of disconnection and powerlessness is faithful and necessary work. We cannot consent to being distantly devastated, dear ones. Being love, holding to the power of love that we know to be true, this is a holy through line for Unitarian Universalists. UUSC has been resisting fascism since 1940. It's a beautiful button as well, and it's a truly frightening statement. UUSC has been being love in solidarity with the worth and dignity and power of all people. As the Reverend Ella Kimler fiercely reminds us, love is the answer. And I don't mean the feeling of love, I mean the force of love. I mean love as power. I mean love which insists that we all belong to one another.
So many of the systems that organize our shared life, politically, economically, and socially, are powered by domination and supremacy. Racism, patriarchy, extractive capitalism, they're tools of empire, of alienation and oppression. This we know. And we can resist these systems. Our resistance can take the form of organizing, supporting human rights work by joining UUSC, learning about racist systems and committing to the work of anti-racism, working for peace, accompanying people seeking asylum, and accompanying internally displaced people who are trans and gender expansive by providing a safe place to sleep. Around the world, with your support, UUSC works with partners to challenge systems, to resist systems that deny our connection and kinship and reject the worth of people based on their identities. In rejecting the idea that there is no other way and little we can do, feminist activists in Poland, the Pacific Island students, grassroots groups in Burma and nearby refugee camps, feminist farmers in Nicaragua, land and water defenders in Honduras, and many others are showing us and leading us toward another world.
At a fascism resistance training last week, because here we are again, someone said we need a global liberation party. And y'all, even though I have a poli-sci degree, my first imagination was of a global celebration, complete with disco balls and streamers, celebrating our collective liberation. And then I caught on to the context, it was about a political party, but there for a minute, the joy was real. And I want to give thanks that joy does not wait for the struggle to be over, that joy can accompany us through facing ourselves in our entirety and turning with hope and curiosity towards our own faithful liberatory practices, resisting the lies of disconnection and powerlessness, holding one another in the midst of unthinkable sorrow, breathing in and out, in solidarity with each other, remembering our connections, our collective dignity, worth, and power. Friends, we are not drowning, we are fighting. In solidarity, we have a bigger voice and a stronger presence. Thank you for joining in solidarity with UUSC, the UU College of Social Justice, and all the grassroots partners who consistently and stubbornly claim their power and reject the notion that there is little that we can do. May we continue to find the courage together to practice liberation again and again with a love which insists that we all belong to one another. And so it is.